All right, so I recorded this video yesterday, and I'm going through it today, and I realize I'm kind of being an asshole in this video. I'm kind of being a little mean about the writing quality of this article, and I mean it is a bad article, and it does deserve harsh criticism. But at the same time, I just want to acknowledge that this is a tough business for writers. It's not easy to make it as a freelancer. It's not easy to come up with all this content and get paid practically nothing for it, which is the case with a lot of these sites. I just want to acknowledge that this is a rough business, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody in particular. I just some of these pieces really get under my skin, you know? So, without further ado, enjoy this ramble and rant of mine. Welcome back. I'm Eric Kane. Sometimes I just like to go through articles that make me mad, or sad, or glad. This one at cbr.com. Not a place you usually go to get particularly good content, but I saw it being passed around and I took a look. It's titled 10 Ways Lord of the Rings Has Aged Poorly. Like many books out of the 1950s, some elements of Tolkien's work haven't aged particularly well. A book having outdated elements doesn't necessarily mean they're bad things. Just because certain elements of The Lord of the Rings have fallen out of fashion in contemporary literature doesn't mean they can't still be enjoyed. However, some parts of the book have aged poorly because they are problematic and offensive in ways that went uncorrected at the time. Oh no! Somebody should have corrected J.R.R. Tolkien when he made these problematic and offensive... But wait, what are these problematic and offensive things? 10 out of 10. We start with number 10. Tolkien's writing features plot cul-de-sacs for the sake of world building. He wouldn't want to world build. Tolkien's Middle-earth is one of the most meticulously crafted fantasy settings in existence. Yada 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 da, 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 da. While this makes for an incredibly rich setting, it occasionally resulted in clunky storytelling. When the main four hobbits take an unplanned detour through the old forest and meet the strange Tom Bombadil, readers are treated to many pages about a character who will soon disappear from the plot. While this establishes more about the world of Middle-earth, modern audiences are used to very streamlined stories and expect every chapter of a book to advance the main plot. Fuck modern audiences. Fuck modern sensibilities. No, but seriously, yes, fuck this shit. This is a terrible point that's written terribly. This isn't a problem. This isn't a bug, it's a feature. Tom Bombadil is mysterious and strange and something that you can talk about when you discuss the book. You can say, who is Tom Bombadil? What's the reason he's in this story? What significance does he have? And we can talk about that when we talk about the book, when we have our little book club and we sit around. If somebody at my book club was like, well, modern audiences are used to streamlined stories and expect every chapter to, I'll smack them in the face. That's what I would do. My book club is also a fight club. So if you come to my book club and you don't want to get smacked in the face, don't say stupid shit like this. Okay. 9 out of 10. Random characters show up for a short amount of time in The Lord of the Rings. That sounds like the point number 10. This is a different point? Some characters from these writings, notably the elf Glorfindel, make small appearances in The Lord of the Rings, but don't influence the plot too much before leaving. Tolkien fans love these cameos, but many modern readers are left frustrated by them. Fuck modern readers. Readers of contemporary fantasy like A Song of Ice and Fire are used to characters sticking around and making surprising contributions to the overall plot. Though this element of Tolkien's writing may have aged poorly in novel form, having cameos from random characters does seem to be taking off in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. God grant me patience. It sounds like modern audiences actually do like cameos from random characters. If that's taking off in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, God, this shit pisses me off. I'm sorry. It's just... Okay. this is as far as I've read now. Before making this video, I read those 2 points and I was like, I have to make a video about this because it's just, it's so bad. Okay, moving on to number 8. Tolkien's heroes seem invincible. I wonder what modern audiences think of that. The Lord of the Rings largely centers on a war, and they are written by a war veteran. Considering these facts, it's strange that none of the main characters die. Fans of the film adaptations might argue Boromir, but in the books he was a very shallow character simply meant to show audiences the effect of the ring. That's an interesting interpretation of Boromir. Of course, a character doesn't have to die to be affected by war. Tolkien himself knew that very well. Why? Because he didn't die in war? However, modern audiences have the perception that characters dying and other dark elements make a work of fiction more realistic. I just have to pause here. I think the reason that I keep getting so annoyed by this phrase, modern audiences, why it just makes my blood boil, is because you're not, Sean, you're not arguing your own case here. You're not arguing why you feel or believe that these things are aging poorly. You're simply giving that to modern audiences. You're saying, oh, modern audiences think this. Modern audiences think that. What do you think, Sean? What do you think? Because when I write something about a piece of literature or a film, I don't give a shit about modern audiences. I give a shit about me. That's the only thing I care about, is what I think. Because that's how criticism works. You write criticism because of how a piece of art makes you feel, how it affects you, your level of enjoyment. When I read The Lord of the Rings, I don't think, gosh, this scene here, what would modern audiences think? This is also circular reasoning. You're arguing that it's aged poorly because modern readers would expect different things because of newer books. That doesn't mean it's aged poorly. It's just means that it's aged. Let's see, number 7. Some of the Lord of the Rings main characters lack agency. Contemporary readers, oh my god. Contemporary readers like their principal characters to have agency in their story, and characters who don't are often maligned. A good example might be Twilight's Bella Swan, who many readers dislike due to her passive role in the narrative. I've never read those books, so I really couldn't say. In The Two Towers, Merry and Pippin are largely passive characters. They begin in the book captured by a pack of orcs and stay that way until the Rohirrim kill the orcs and allow Merry and Pippin to escape with little effort. Later, they become passive observers of the Ent's destruction of Isengard. I don't know. I don't know if I would fully agree, first of all, with this description of Merry and Pippin as passive. But not all characters. That's not a very good example of lack of agency either. Oh, here we go. Number 6. The story takes a while to get started. A lot of modern media, books included, are very concerned with hooking audiences as quickly as possible. In an oversaturated landscape of fiction, it makes sense that books need to do everything they can to prevent readers from putting them down and moving on to the next one. Because the Lord of the Rings books were published in a very different setting, they do not have the same sense of urgency. For audiences who are used to fantasy stories that start during an exciting action scene, or else at the book's climax before flashing back, the Fellowship of the Ring's opening will likely feel quaint and outdated. Were it to be published today, readers might not make it through the somewhat dry explanation of what a hobbit is before deciding they'd rather read a Brandon Sanderson book that starts with a magic-fueled assassination instead. I know what this piece is. This is actually commentary on how fucking stupid people are these days and how we're all just so glued to our phones that we don't have patience to actually read literature anymore. We just need to be hooked because modern audiences suck. So this is just a critique of modern audiences, not a critique of The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings books lack diversity. Ha! I knew we'd get to this one. Because Tolkien was largely inspired by white European history and myths, The Lord of the Rings is not a very diverse series of books. The main cast of characters is all presumed to be white based on the books, and even adaptations of the work reflect this lack of diversity. I mean, there's elves and dwarves and orcs and trolls and ents and stuff. You don't... Look, I've argued both sides of this to some degree. I think that if you make an adaptation and you want to have more diversity, that's fine. If that's your artistic vision, go for it. But having a lack of diversity in a story that is largely about European, a European folklore is not a problem either. It's like if I wrote a Viking book so that I could adapt it into a series and then star in it as the Viking badass that I always wanted to be. If I wrote that, I wouldn't have it be diverse any more than if I wrote, or somebody else, or if anybody, if I wrote a story of an African fantasy with African warriors and kings and mythical beasts. That could also not be diverse, and that wouldn't be problematic. Representation in media matters, as some studies have suggested that positive representation can lead to a greater acceptance of people who are othered. Oh God. Having a series of books featuring all white lead characters is a notion that feels outdated with today's sensibilities. Let's read that sentence again. Having a series of books featuring all white lead characters is a notion. Having a series of books is a notion? Having a series of books is a notion. That doesn't make any sense. This is poorly written. It feels dated with today's sensibilities. Oh God, help us. 4 out of 10. Some races in The Lord of the Rings are inherently evil. What's funny about this is people will call this writer an SJW, but this is clearly not somebody who cares deeply about this issue of diversity or any of that. It's just the trendy thing to do. By all means, let's read a smart critique of the lack of diversity. But this is a non-believer just riding the bandwagon. In The Lord of the Rings, there are certain races that are only represented by evil characters. The orcs, uruks, and goblins, for instance, only appear in the form of evil antagonists, leading readers to believe that all members of these races are evil. They're corrupted by Morgoth. I mean, that's the whole point. He says Tolkien said nothing is evil in the beginning, which is a good sentiment. Yeah, but these are corrupted. They weren't evil in the beginning, and then they were corrupted into evil. And I mentioned this, I like in the Rings of Power that Adar cares about his orcs and that they've tried to flesh those out a little bit. I think that's cool, but they're evil, and this is okay. Let's see. However, when every character from a race is shown to be evil, it does make readers think that every member of that race must be evil. What the fuck? Yes, it does make readers think that, because they are. Even if the races depicted are fantasy races, the idea that a group of people is all born with the same immutable qualities is outdated and frankly problematic. Frankly problematic, guys. I'm sorry. It's just so bad. This is a terrible, terrible article. Why is it problematic? You can't say that because they're all portrayed as evil, people think they're all evil, and that's problematic. You need to give reasoning to your arguments. You need to explain why. Why is it problematic that all orcs, which are a fictional species... You say race, but I mean, come on, it's a fucking species, right? Like, it's not the same species as humans. I can say all wolves are predators, all deer are herbivores, and it's not frankly problematic. Like, give me a fucking reason. Don't just state things. That's not how you write an opinion piece. You have to have reasons. You have to elaborate on them. You have to make arguments. Number 3. The geography of Middle-earth is concerning. I've always thought that. I've always been like, I'm concerned that when we have to cross the Misty Mountains, it's going to be cold and there's going to be a lot of snow. Or like, when we go to Mordor, we simply do not walk into Mordor. So how do we get there? It's very concerning. All right, let's see what Sean has to say. Some critics of Tolkien's work have pointed out some potentially concerning connections between where certain groups live in Middle-earth and real-life biases. Oh, that's where he's going with. I thought he was concerned with the mountains. Geographically, there is a largely east versus west dynamic in the books, which is even directly referenced in the text. Wait, it's in the books and referenced in the text? Oh my god. In the books, the good characters are from the west and the bad characters are from the east. I mean, it just depends. Gondor's east of the Shire, and they're still good. Tolkien addressed this criticism, saying it arose simply due to the narrative he was telling, but it does parallel some concerning talking points. Concerning. The idea of protecting Western civilization has been used by some bad actors in support of white nationalism and xenophobia. More politically active readers of The Lord of the Rings will likely see some red flags in this similarity. I think Tolkien was just, you're writing about what you know. He's writing about an analog to Europe, and the East is just, beyond that, the distant realm, where, and so there are some areas that are just out of the story altogether. They're too far away. And then there are, Easterlings or whatever who worked with Morgoth. And that definitely is, I would say, a product of Tolkien's time. Modern audiences won't stand for it. 2 out of 10, Tolkien's work features uncomfortable racial terminology. We've really gone in the second half of this all to diversity and race stuff, haven't we? I bet I know what number 1's gonna be. I peeked. Well, possibly not intentional on Tolkien's part, there are certain words he chooses to use that in a modern context raise a few eyebrows. While Tolkien himself professed to be anti-racist, I'm sure he used that term too. He was like, I'm so sick of white fragility, guys. And there is strong evidence to support he meant this. Some of his terminologies were ill thought out and have aged poorly for modern audiences. A clear example of this comes in Chapter 10 of Fellowship of the Ring when Aragorn is discussing the Nazgul with Barliman Butterbur. The innkeeper says that no black man shall pass my doors while I can stand on my legs. Yeah, he wasn't referring to black people, dude. Obviously, they were talking about dudes in black robes. No black-robed man shall pass my doors. And also refers to the Nazgul using a slur. What slur? What slur? These lines have aged poor. That's your whole argument here? There's just this example of describing a Nazgul as a black man because he's wearing a black hood? What's the slur? Did he call him the N-word? Oh my god. Tolkien called the Nazguls a Nazgul. The N-word. Sorry. These lines have aged poorly and are likely to detract from the entire message of love and cooperation in the books. I know when I get to Chapter 10 of Fellowship of the Rings, I usually burn a copy. Just burn it. Screw that racism. Number 1, Tolkien's world features very few women. I knew this was coming even before I peeked. The Lord of the Rings is largely a story about male characters. The female characters in Tolkien's work are largely sidelined or defined by their relationships to men in the story. By today's standard, this type of storytelling doesn't really hold up. Similar to ensuring there is good representation across races, it is also important for media to portray characters of multiple genders. Though Tolkien does include some good moments for his female characters, notably Eowyn slaying the Witch King, they do not feel like fully realized people. Yeah, well, I mean, they say write what you know. Tolkien was writing a story about going off to war, something you usually do with other guys. Generally speaking, and especially in Tolkien's day, women didn't really go to war except for to go as support, nurses and so forth, which is a heroic calling in and of itself, of course. These more modern, Dragonlance and Brandon Sanderson and all. There's a lot more like female fighters and warriors. You've got Galadriel and Rings of Power. Just having more women isn't always going to be the answer. As I noted when I talked about Rings of Power, for all their attempts at like boss girl badass female characters, they didn't do a very good job. Bronwyn, Galadriel, the two sort of badass women in the show are both very unlikable and and poorly thought out. Bronwyn is a healer lady who like magically becomes the general of the peasant army of the Southlands, and it's terrible writing. Galadriel is essentially like a Karen 99% of the time. By all means, let's have more awesome characters like Éowyn. Let's do more of that. I'm down for it. And I think like it makes a lot of sense in Tolkien's day and age and his perspective to write a very male-centric story. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't even think it's aged poorly. I think aging poorly means that it's no longer as enjoyable, and I don't think that's true. I think that this misses the point of whether these books hold up in terms of their literary value and your ability to take important meaning from the stories, which you do. You still can. But I think it's also I think it's generally a good thing that we have more interesting fantasy stories for female characters also nowadays, and even shortly after Tolkien's time, that was happening. I mean, some stories are going to be more male centric, other stories are going to be more female centric, and not every story has to have, again, a wide array of diversity of sexes or races. Most importantly, a diversity of different stories is what we should be trying for. There are going to be, I mean, God, like the movie 1917 came out recently. Brilliant movie. There are almost no women in that movie. It's a story about World War I that takes place over a short period of time. And it's almost all men. And it's very white. And it's fantastic. And it wouldn't be better if there were more women or more races, because it wouldn't make sense for that story itself. You have to have context when you talk about these things. On the same note, if you were going to make a story about modern New York City, and and you just made it about a couple, just a bunch of white people, it would feel weird and feel out of place, and it would be strange because, of course, New York City is extremely diverse. Though, I mean, you potentially there is that story to be made too. Contextually, again, it would depend on why it was about 8 white dudes and not about anything else. But anyways, I just wanted to have a little fun with this terrible article. Anyways, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and have a lovely day. Peace.